Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you for tuning into one of our talks today. Today, we're so lucky to be joined by the fantastic Beth Riesgraf to talk all about leverage redemption. And, it's such a unique opportunity as an actor to get this opportunity to revisit a character, to bridge the gap and fill in the time. And in looking back at some of the old episodes, what were some of the details that you started really honing in on and keying into first in order to reconstruct and redevelop this character and to really think about the time in between when the show ended and where you're picking up from with her?
Yeah, I think, for me, going back to the beginning was really helpful because we were picking up years later with these characters. And, we had to keep in mind that years had passed since we'd seen them. And, there was going to be a period of growth. So to fully make sure I was on track with all of that, I started with square one and watched all the episodes again. And, I had kept journals, Parker journals and all these things. So I started kind of revisiting some of those moments and drawing upon those experiences kind of in a new unit of time. And I found it really, really helpful. And I was reminded of all these, the nuances that between, the characters, the interpersonal relationships and how those grew. And just to remind myself of the history that they had in this group as well. And then I had a great conversation with the showrunner and the producers, and we talked a lot about, okay, what does this mean this season? Where are we? What are we able to do? And, obviously we had a lot of restrictions because of COVID. We were one of the first shows to come back. And so my character, the physicality, doing all the lifts and the stealing elements and, crowds and all these things, it was going to be a little bit complicated. So I did my best to kind of brush up on my stunt prep, I guess you could say. And then my lift techniques and things like that for wallets. I did a little bit of that, but for the most part, it was kind of like saying hello to an old friend, and waking up a part of me that I had to kind of put to rest for a second. And it was really, really beautiful and fun. And I loved the exploration.
I was going to say the stunt work and the physical elements of this character is already impressive. And then when you take it off the back of no one leaving their houses and us all being on our couches for several months, it's extra impressive.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah. But within that, I was also really interested in your relationship with the stunt team on the show and the evolution, because it's something where you've taken this character and she's got these great skill sets and there's a lot of physicality and wire work within it. But then she's always getting better and doing new and interesting and different things. And there's always new ways to use the physicality to tell a story. So is there a constant evolution of skills that you're having to continue training and developing when you're playing her?
Yeah, absolutely. I think early on I had felt more pressure to really be able to perform everything. And I thought, oh, I'm, not going to be fully living as this character if I can't actually do a back bend and I can't do all these things. So I was a little bit younger then too, to be honest. But I used to train. The season one shot in LA, and then we moved up to Portland, Oregon, and there's a series of bridges there. And so I remember waking up at 3 a.m. to go run the bridges before coming back to, make sure my 4-year-old was okay. And then I got ready and I'd drive an hour to stage, and then I'd warm up there with the stunt guys. Like, there was a lot that went into it back then. And then I think over time I started to see, oh, realistically, there's so many elements that are going to get covered with someone who can do this much better than I can do it. But I think as long as I'm in the mind state that I'm like training and I'm doing it and I'm ready and I'm agile, the main thing I realized is you just have to be in good enough shape not to get hurt and to look like, the ins and outs of certain moves. And I've had the pleasure of working with some of the best stunt women, in the business. And Jessie Graff went on to win like American Gladiator, do all these amazing things. So I learned from really, really wonderful women, and they were like, listen, if you can just sell this one move, we'll buy that it's you, but I think more than anything, the hours that we work, the rigor, it's so rigorous, and you're there before the sun's up, and sometimes you leave after the sun's gone down. So I think stamina and, being able to stay fresh, like any actor, like those muscles have to be worked in many ways, mentally and physically. But yeah, I think I got back into my yoga and stretching and doing all the things I could do from home, and then just decided that the world is where it's at, and I'm going to do the best I can do.
Yeah. And you were talking before about the journaling that you did with the show originally. And I love the fact that it sounds like that's
Mhm.
something that was a really continuous part of the process and not just initial character development. And has that continued to really be part of how you shape characters, live with characters? And were you still doing that when shooting the most recent episodes for this season in terms of just like putting down a lot of the details and filling in a lot of the gaps between the scripts?
Yeah, I think initially, yes. And then, for me, a lot of it, this season in particular was about more about redemption and, second chances. And I was more playing a supportive role to some of the other characters and welcoming Brianna in, who's Hardison's little sister, and um, Gina Bellman, who plays Sophie, being a support to her when she really needed it. And so it was a little bit of a different approach for me in terms of how I journaled or kept track of things. A lot of it was finding it on the day, organically just showing up, being present and finding those moments with everybody. It felt a little bit more like, because we had all this history, we could naturally lean into what was already there and then see what would happen, and how we could kind of, play and off of one another and explore, well, let's try it this way, let's try it that way. I mean, one of the strengths of the show, I think, is that we've always all had really good chemistry. And so we can improvise and try new things. And Parker, I'm lucky with her because there's no rules really with Parker. So, I can make a comment or be super blunt or laugh when it seems inappropriate, but there's always for me a reason behind everything she does. It's not just an, arbitrary thing. And that was really important to me in developing her initially. I thought because she was on the streets and was a foster kid and didn't have a home most of the time. She was a lone wolf. And I thought, okay, well, what do you do when you be on the streets, and what would you be observing as a young kid? And animals always came to mind for me. So I thought, she's got instincts like an animal, and that's how she's kind of learned to be, guarded and protective and all these things. So that's one thing I really kept with her, and didn't really need to, I suppose, keep as much track of the arc this season in the way I maybe would have during more emotional seasons or something like that.
And with that idea that there is this very family-like element to these group of characters, and with what you were talking about before in terms of support, you really see there's so many moments and instances where each of them, they really read each other emotionally very well, and they know when someone needs to be lifted up off the ground. They know what each other need emotionally from them. And so I wanted to ask you about how that really transcends into the way that you work on scenes as well, because so much of that is also about really reading each other within the scene and figuring out what does their character need from my character, and how those two kind of parallels come together for you.
Yeah. This year, I think coming into it, the moment we all got into the table read, and I've talked about this and quite a bit, because I think it's so important to know that, no matter how much time passes, sometimes when you've got those friends or those relationships and those family ties in life, you just pick up where you left off. And I think all felt a bit nervous, like, is it going to be as good? Are people going to be, what are the expectations going to be, and all these things. We go in the room and start the table read, and it was like the second we clicked into character, it just started vibing. We all were there together as one, again, riffing, laughing, taking beats. And, to the writer's credit, they always will give us a little nugget, knowing that we'll do something with it, something different, add a line, or whatever. And they learned that pretty early on. We could all do that. And I think the more confidence we all had, we started trusting, like, okay, we sometimes don't need to talk about anything. We're just going to do something, and we're all ready for it. We're all really ready to play. And I think Dean Devlin's been a real leader in that sense, because he said, give us one as is, and then after that, go for it. So you're always ready to play. And if you don't show up ready to play, you'll have to jump in really quickly. And I think it's funny because we were able to create a couple of really, really great moments. Actually, Gina Bellman and I specifically, and there's an episode where it's all girls and the guys are away playing. And, we thought, wait a second, like, yeah, we're here. We're going to do this thing that nobody knows is coming yet. But what would we actually be doing? We're still thieves. We're still a little mischievous. We're still going to have secrets from each other. And, all these things started percolating. And so on the day, and our props master is such an amazing, generous person, because we'll call him up like, hey, do you have a set of chains? Do you have a bunch of money just laying around? Can we just get, all these things at the last minute? And she said, I think I should have stolen a necklace. I was like, I would have money. And then da, 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 da. So because we know each other so well, we feel safe to suggest choices to each other when we have ideas. And we don't worry about offending each other or anything, because it's such a collaborative way of working, and it always has been. So it's a real gift as well, because not all sets are like that. And I think with this group in particular, we love each other, and these characters are so beloved to us as well, that we're like, okay, we're not going to ever do anything to try and outshine each other or any of that nonsense that can go on. It's really about, what can I bring to the table in this moment that will bring out that thing that Elliot does when he gets mad at Parker, or how can I push his buttons a little bit? And he just, they all react so well when we do things like that.
I also really love that idea of play, because that sensibility and tone comes across in the show when you're watching it, and you feel like, these are characters that really enjoy kind of playing around with each other, and you can see that goes into a lot of the scene work together. And within that, you are able to take the show to a place where it feels heightened, and there's a little bit of a heightened sensibility to some of the comedy, like you were saying earlier, how you can really try anything with Parker. But at the same time, there's also an art form to like never taking it one step too far. It still always feels very grounded. And is that something that, coming back to this show and coming back to these characters, that felt very natural and very easy? And was there a dance in figuring out how far can we push the comedy and the heightened aspect of the show, for it to still work when you first started?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something, the tone of this show has always been really special, because it's a show you can watch with your children or your grandparents. And it feels good when you watch the show. You just feel good. You have fun. You're taken on an adventure every episode, right? So all those things, we know the parameters, right? We kind of know we're never going to go so dark that we push people away. At the end of the day, we want them to feel uplifted and inspired with, redemption and all these things, revenge. And it's fun to watch people misbehave. So we like doing all those things. And I think there were times when we thought, okay, we're also coming back, and this is really the showrunners and the writers, it's their wheelhouse more than it is mine, but they knew they were coming back at a time when a lot of people had been isolated, had felt like everything is going wrong. We've all been through a lot. And so I think with that in mind, it was like the fun of the show, the feeling of people stepping in and taking charge to do what's right, helping, make sure that justice is served and all these things. It just felt really good for us to be able to do those things, but also like, okay, yeah, but we don't want to lose the heart, and we don't want to push it so far that it's unrelatable. So those are always conversations we have, and I think every episode, like when I was going back and watching, the setup of the show is always essentially the same. There's a new person every week, and it can be procedural in that way, but it never totally feels that way as an audience member. It always has something fresh and new that's brought to it. And through one of our leads, we always kind of tie something, personal to each one of them that I think really grounds the cause or grounds the element and gives it weight enough to feel like, oh, okay, we're being authentic and we're not trying to, make people totally suspend belief in this moment. But it's a lot of the comments we get are like, oh, it's just so fun. Like, it's so fun. And it made me cheer at the end when you got the bad guy. And at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, this might be what people need right now, is to be able to root for the bad guys who are doing a lot of good.
And you were bringing up Brianna, and I really love the dynamic between the two of them, particularly because it kind of brings out some vulnerabilities in Parker when she starts to feel like she's not the mentor that she wants to be, and there's things that she doesn't know, but then she understands that there's a growth in learning from Brianna as well. And they kind of, by the end of the season, they're both very much on the same page as each other and both learning things from one another. So how did you want to really broach that journey and use that to explore more of the vulnerabilities within Parker?
Yeah, I think, we had a lot of conversations about that initially, because I thought, okay, well, she's had a lot of growth and, but a parent or that type of figure, she's not ready for any of that. And I think, when Hardison says he's got to go, her biggest fear is that she's going to fail. She'll fail him, she'll fail Brianna, and that she's not ready for that. But I think, focusing on the fact that they would all do anything for each other. And at the end of the day, that level of protection and the bonds that they all have, it's almost like it just is a no-brainer for her when she realizes, oh, I'm here to protect her and teach her, but not to the fault of like holding her back, because we all need to be set free to do our best work. And part of the joy of this group is that we embrace our eccentricities and, the things that make us odd in the normal world or whatever, the things that make us really good at what we do in this group. And so I think her learning to kind of back off and let her breathe a little bit, let Brianna do what she does. And then, we had so many ideas that we wanted to try, and we couldn't get them in this season. So I'm really, really excited, knock on wood, for the next go round, because, Elise coming in, she just melted into the group in such a perfect way. Like, we all just took her in and tried to like say, look, there is no wrong decision. There's nothing you can try that we won't, embrace or whatever. And I think at the end of the season, we felt like, oh my gosh, we fully got here together. And now how do we play with this? And I really love the fact that she'll say yes to Parker on pretty much anything in a way that Elliot won't. And Sophie might have to give me a little like mentor moment of like, hey, even though this season Parker is kind of mentoring Sophie in a weird way, Brianna and I started to play with that. I say Brianna, like Elise, but we started to play with that stuff. And she goes, is it okay if you want me to eat cereal? That's your thing. I go, no. You're like me now. Like I'll give you cereal because that's what I do. Like, that's your dinner. Like, she's going to be Parker with you all the way. And the fact that you roll with it is really exciting. And at any moment, Brianna can go off and, she's 10 steps ahead, but the fact that she also has never really had a sister like this and, a family tie like this outside of Hardison and her Nana, it's really fun to build on that as well. And she's totally game for it, which is the best.
And with the fact that, as you said before, every single episode has kind of its own element and new characters being introduced, that also means that every single job requires something completely different in terms of who Parker is assimilating into pretending to be for people. And within that, there's so much in terms of the different physicalities that you bring to a character. Being a Southern woman's very different from a lot of the other personas. There's a lot of dialect work as well. And when you are looking on the page at the scripts at, okay, this is who Parker has to pretend to be in this instance, what's your journey of getting in depth in terms of the details that you really need to bring to that moment? Whether it's, do I need to learn elements of a language? What's the dialect work? What's the physicality of this character? And the spaces that you want to fill in beyond the details in the script and the scene where we're seeing those interactions.
Yeah, I where we find Parker all these years later, she's been running these international teams with Elliot and Hardison, right? So she's had to get really good at all the other things as well. So grifting, you want to sense that she's always like a little millisecond away from twisting something or going too far or whatever, right? So, but not to the point of blowing the con as much anymore. So that was something I really thought about with her. And I thought, well, in going back to that animal instinct and learning how to thrive in an environment and blend in and survive and all those things, her level of observation and ability to duplicate personalities and all these things, I think Sophie probably approaches it more from a theatrical, organic place as an actor and a thespian, whereas Parker just is like, I knew a lady who did that, or she'll go find someone and then just create an extreme version of that person. And I think because her own social skills have gotten more honed, she's able to rein it in when she needs to. But we always have, the dialects and the things. I imagine she's been working very hard on certain things and has learned from Sophie over the years as well. There's a great moment where Sophie finds out Hardison has been giving Parker these cards, these clue cards, like, hey, this is what people do when they want to get out of a bad situation, or this is when they, want to flirt, want to do this. So to allude to the fact, like, she didn't just get good at this like overnight, but she's been really working on it. And through control and through a lot of practice, she's figured out how much she can kind of get away with. And the dialects and things, as an actor, it's always really fun because we get these scripts pretty quickly, and pretty quickly right before, meaning the episode starts. And so sometimes you've only got a few days to really nail a dialogue or whatever. And I have the luxury of knowing, like, okay, Parker with the Southern Belle, it can be a little more Texas, because if Sophie were doing it, would be authentic New Orleans, like, let's go. It almost sounds New Yorky, blah, blah. But I was like, she wouldn't know that necessarily, So there are specifics that I really do try to I did do the work on, so that I can keep it true to who she is, even when she's grifting.
And I also really wanted to talk about you directing on the show as well, and ask about how your background in photography really influenced the way that you stepped behind the camera and thought about that myriad of the language of the show and the way that it visually tells a story already. And then how you also wanted to really frame and think about certain shots and certain angles and certain movements with the camera, and the way that you wanted to bring in your own stylistic sensibilities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with every show you go into, there's already kind of a Bible, right? Like, this is the tone, this is how it looks, this is how it feels. I had the advantage of knowing the show so well that I knew the parameters, and then I knew that I had a little freedom, in certain moments to put my touch on it, to put my spin on it. And I think you can really feel that in the 2 episodes I did, especially the one that will air towards the end of the season. But it's really been a fun journey, because the crew, a lot of the crew are some of the OGs from back, our DP and our A cameramen. They've been with us the whole time, even through the first Leverage. So they saw me with a camera around my neck, and we always geeked out about, light, camera questions, this, that. So when I said, hey, what about doing a oneer? Like, how can we do this shot? And they were like, well, I don't know, but maybe we could get a forklift. Like, having a crew that says, like, I don't know, but let's figure it out. Right. So that was hugely helpful. And I knew that going in. So I had a really good idea of, like, okay, in this moment, when I read a script, I see everything really visually. And that first pass, especially for me as an artist, is a very special space. So I try not to ever self-edit or, tamper with that. And so I'll write every single picture down that I get. And then I go back through and realize what's practical, what will we actually have time to do? And by the end of it, I've got a couple options, right? So I always have a plan B, but I'll always try to go for the more creative choice if I can make it work. And, I am a visual thinker, and I've always really loved storytelling. So getting the opportunity to do this with characters that I know so well, and I know where I can push them. And I know if I have an idea, how these actors can execute it. And they were so lovely. Like, when I would throw something out, they didn't say, oh, that's weird, or that's not going to work. Or, they were just like, cool, yeah, let's try it. And so I was able to actually kind of incorporate a bit of my own personal eye and storytelling style, which I was really excited about, because of the support I think I had through everybody as well.
And with that idea of making a lot of creative choices as well, and really problem solving to figure out how to do things, was there a scene as well where you were directing yourself and you wanted to be coming in from a parachute that caused kind of a lot of problem solving and creatively having to figure out a lot of the details?
Yeah, I think this might have been a day where everybody was like, what the hell? But I read something, okay, look, it's like, with the restriction, we had a lot of, we shoot this show so fast, and there's really not much time, and it is a run and gun. So there's a moment where it was like, Parker appears in a doorway. I was like, oh, that's kind of boring. Like, well, how could she appear? And I'm like, well, there's a sky in the courtyard. She should just parachute down. She shouldn't be jumping out of a plane, because I'm always thinking about how she lives when she's not on screen. Where has she come from? What is she doing? What's her, she's always training and doing all kinds of things. And so they said, okay, well, how do you want to pull that off? And I was like, okay, this is what we'll need. You do all your meetings with everybody. And I showed up that day, and you're always there a bit early and everything. And the guys are scratching their heads, and they're like, Beth, we've been at this thing, and, for an hour and a half, we don't know how to make this gag work. And there's, 200 feet of parachute laid out on the ground. And these big buff guys like, what are we going to do with this thing? And I said, all right, just roll with me for a second. Can I give it a shot? And they kind of giggled and they're like, okay, Beth, yeah. But we dug through boxes of ropes and props and using something that wasn't even meant to be used for that purpose and attaching it to a stunt harness. And then I was like, okay, let's tie it up like this. Now you guys go over there. And, we were kind of in the wings of the stage. So everyone's lighting and doing everything in there. And we're back there messing around. And all of a sudden we got a huge turbo fan. And this is also the luxury of being on a show that's got anything you could ask for, right? Do you have a huge turbo fan that we could get right away? Yes. We get 4 extra bodies to hold the ends of this parachute. So anyway, with the right, attitude and love for one another, we all kind of pitched in and made this gag work where all these guys are holding this thing and there's a fan, and then I just run into frame and the parachute perfectly billows behind me. And everybody was like, holy shit, she made this work. And I think they all thought it was a bit nuts. Like, you want to pair what? Okay. And, also the funny thing is like, you don't want to, with Parker, it's like, she's an adrenaline junkie. So that flies. It's not, oh, Beth wants to make the scene about her. It's actually like, no, this is a great choice for the character. And if we can pull it off, then it's going to work. But there's always like a little squeaky bit of like, well, if it doesn't work, then what are you going to do? Well, then I'll just have it, laying on the ground as if I've just taken it off or whatever. But we were actually able to create the motion and the movement because everybody, they're adventurous in spirit. These guys, we're all kind of just running around trying to make a show in the middle of a pandemic. So why not?
I have to say, I really love the evolution that you've been able to bring to this character and all of the details, like running in off of a parachute that you've been able to incorporate into the show. And so excited that there's still more episodes to come later this year. And thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you so much for that. It was great talking with you.